Has there ever been a time in the Resident Evil franchise that we got a fully fledged creepy doll and a mysterious puppeteer in the background? Because as far as I can remember, Resident Evil has always steered away from the supernatural aspects, always opting to explain all the horrific monsters and mutations that we saw due to the infections of numerous viruses and strains. But this time around, Resident Evil Village is taking a different step compared to its predecessors, because now one of the 4 lords in RE Village will be delving more into the realm of the supernatural, at least from the outside's perspective, which this can start with our introduction to the Lord of House Beneviento, Donna Beneviento, and her doll, Angie.
Furthermore, I can assure you that you entrust the moment to House Beneviento. My daughters and I shall deliver them.
I want to see. He's awake.
Shut the fuck up.
Alright, so with that small clip alone, and all the gathered information that we have so far with Donna Beneviento and Angie, a lot of questions has been raised on how is this possible within the realm of Resident Evil, and how will this theme of a walking, breathing, and living doll be implemented within the storyline in Resident Evil Village. Also, who and what is Donna Beneviento, and how is she able to control Angie from afar like that, and what are her concept and background designs inspired from, which in this video, we'll be delving into some of the classic folklore that may answer some of the creative direction as to how Donna Beneviento and Angie was conceptualized. We'll also piece together all the data that we have so far from Resident Evil Village and correlate them on how the house crest of Beneviento symbolizes Donna and Angie perfectly. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and start our video, which we can begin with a prospective use of puppetry by Donna and how this aspect of her character can be explained with some psychological projections to an inanimate objects and some old folklore tales in regards to dolls, because upon closer inspection, we have yet to see Donna Beneviento's true face being hidden in the background and covered with a full body mourning garb, an aesthetic that is commonly used for those who have lost a loved one and was highly prevalent in the Victorian era, with many examples from the past highlighting this exact clothing and symbolism of sadness and death. This of course is a direct opposite in design and characterization of the doll Angie that Donna has full control over, with the loud and exuberant personality, the more revealing aspect to her face, and the use of a white wedding dress as her main attire, which in popular culture is supposed to symbolize a lively and happy event for those participating in holy matrimony, which this already is a stark contrast between the puppet and puppet master. If anything so far, from what we've seen to date, Donna is playing more of a role of an inanimate doll herself compared to the lively puppet Angie, with a clip showing Donna sitting in the background, hardly making her presence known, while we have Angie take center stage, causing a small ruckus during the 4 Lords ensemble, which this contrasting appearances and personalities between the two already gives us a hint to their character designs, and how this also perfectly correlates with the Beneviento crest. Because taking a further look into the house symbol, we see the contrast of the sun and moon, which can be interpreted with the light and dark, yin and yang. Also, with some research, some have come to conclude that the symbolism of the sun and moon together represents a celebration of life and happiness to the sadness and mourning of an individual. Again, this correlation alone already fits perfectly to what we've seen from both Donna and Angie, hinting to a darker past that may have happened to the Lord of House Beneviento. Some may have concluded that Angie could be the physical manifestation of her former personality, but due to some tragic and traumatic events, this has caused her to become a secluded shell, using the doll Angie as a conduit of her former self. Also, since we are in the direction of using dolls, puppetry, and using inanimate objects for personal projections, this is actually a good time to correlate with another long-standing speculation of those who use dolls and puppets as a means to show their true personalities, or what you call your inner selves. because there has been many studies that were conducted that show that people using dolls as a means of therapy and communication, allowing the person to separate themselves from the traumatic event by using the doll as a conduit to explain said traumatic events, preserving the mental clarity of those who experience these horrible events, which again can be attributed to what we saw from Angie and Donna, allowing the latter to stay sane after her traumatic events by letting Angie be the manifestation of her true personality. Also, through an outsider's perspective, it's easy to see that the overall design concept of using a doll would give the players a sense of creepiness and dread, especially with popular movies like Child's Play, Dead Silence, and The Conjuring using dolls or puppets as a means to invoke terror for those watching. Even the developers for Resident Evil Village had this in mind when creating the characters of Donna and Angie, stating that it is great to see the reception to both characters and how terrifying the combination of these two are. This of course is also supplemented with the many uses of dolls from the past and present as a means of witchcraft, voodoo, and many other dark aspects, adding to the overall creep factor garnished between these two characters. So with all that covered and the correlation of light and dark, differences in personalities, and the dynamic of a puppet and puppet master, this still begs the question, how does this fit within the world of Resident Evil? Because remember earlier that I mentioned that the Resident Evil franchise has stayed away from the true supernatural aspects within the survival horror genre, with most of the infections and monstrosities that we've seen today in this franchise has always been explained in some means due to a viral infection, a new strain that causes hallucinations, or some type of scientific invention that portray a supernatural-like ability. Because in the end, both Donna Beneviento and Angie will have to stay within the realm of realism in the Resident Evil world, because I would highly doubt that these two antagonists would be the first to see some type of spiritual or supernatural means of character design and development, because the closest that we've seen to the supernatural-like gameplay in the Resident Evil franchise was with the development stage of Resident Evil 4, which portrayed a living and moving dolls and a hookman. So how can we explain Angie's supposed autonomy away from Donna? Because the short clip highlighted that Angie can be operated from a fair distance from Donna. Also on top of that, there are no indications of strings or a remote control that tells us that Angie is being operated by Donna in real time. If anything, Angie is portrayed as a self-autonomous doll with its own personality, while Donna just sits in the background away from all the commotion. So how can we answer this question of using a supposed live doll that fits within the realm of Resident Evil? Well, the first theory one could have is that Angie is a small robot programmed with an AI, similar to what we saw with Umbrella Corporation's Red Queen. Though instead of serving a company, this AI is only there to serve the wishes of Donna Beneviento and could have been programmed to act according to her previous personality. Another speculation that adds to this is what appears to be another mark on Angie's forehead. Some stated that this could be housing a camera or maybe a small antenna receptor, similar to what we saw with the T-103 tyrant Mr. X, allowing Donna to still control Angie from afar to a certain degree. Though again, how could this happen when there is no evidence of a controlling device that manipulates Angie? Well, the one conclusion could be made out is that Donna could be wearing a headgear that allows her to control the doll with her mind, though this theory really does play into the more far-fetched scientific devices. But overall, this can't be ruled out, because within the realm of Resident Evil, mind transfers or copying one's consciousness has already happened within the timeline of this franchise, with examples to this was in Resident Evil Revelations 2 and how the antagonist Alex Wesker copied her own consciousness and implanted it within a viable host who happened to be Natalia Corda. So who's to say that Donna isn't using a similar technology to this? Also, there is the fact that Mother Miranda is very much involved with the four lords of this village. So for all we know, Mother Miranda could have given Donna the technology for her to use. Anyways, overall, we could speculate on how Donna Beneviento was able to control Angie, or maybe Angie is her own separate being. Also, the notion of Angie's autonomy and personality being Nathan Winters' hallucination is quickly dispelled due to Carl Heisenberg telling the small doll to shut the fuck up, acknowledging the doll's presence and the commotion it's causing within the ensemble of this clip. Anyways, in conclusion, the design and development for Donna Beneviento and her doll Angie is a great one, with the developers creating a character that embodies the true creep factor of the survival horror genre, where we have a character leaning more into the realm of the supernatural, though still within the realism of this franchise. Also, the contrasting designs and personalities of these two characters symbolize with their actions, but also with the Beneviento's house crest, cementing the contrasting idea of the sun and moon, happiness and sadness, and light and darkness. Anyways, in the end, Donna Beneviento and Angie is definitely gonna be one of the highlights of Resident Evil Village, where they can be the epitome of horror that we all want. But as the game soon to be released, I will cover Donna and Angie again in a much more in-depth analysis. So for now, this is just a precursor to what to expect from one of the lords of Resident Evil Village. Anyways, I do hope you guys enjoyed this pre-release character analysis of Donna Beneviento and her doll Angie. And as always, I just want to say thank you guys so much for watching, and this is Hey DeVuH, and I'll see you guys on the next video.